Let's talk about the Big East, and we're going to talk about West Virginia. The Mountaineers look loaded. 9 starters back on both sides of the ball, including their all-everything running back, Noel Devine, one of the best running backs in the country. He returns, as well as the wideout, and I love this name. Okay, it's a great football name. Jock Sanders. Okay, we can quit laughing now. But seriously, West Virginia does have to replace the quarterback, and if you look at the schedule, it's going to be kind of demanding. They have a big non-league game in September against LSU, and it is on the road. So West Virginia, if they win that game, you can take them very, very seriously. The Cincinnati Bearcats are the defending 2-time Big East champions, but they have a lot of shoes to fill, including the one on the sideline, Brian Kelly. He's now at Notre Dame, so new head coach, going to have a new quarterback because Tony Pike has finally moved on. Zach Corrales will have to fill those shoes for the Bearcats, and plus they don't have Marty Gilliard anymore. And the defense last year, despite the fact that the Bearcats went 12-0, looked vulnerable down the stretch, and against Florida they looked very vulnerable. So they have to patch up that D, and they do have a big showdown in late September out of league when Oklahoma visits Paul Brown Stadium. That game will be at the Cincinnati Bengals' home. The Pittsburgh Panthers is my pick to win the Big East. The big reason why is because their ground game is going to be dangerous. This guy could be the best running back that's not in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We're talking about Dejon Lewis, who last year as a freshman absolutely kicked tail. He is back, but just like West Virginia, Pittsburgh has to replace the quarterback. The defense, though, is the best in the Big East. And that leads me to the game of the year in the Big East. It's going to be the backyard brawl between West Virginia and Pittsburgh. It's going to be terrific running back versus terrific running back. Devine versus Lewis. But it could be the battle of the QB, the new QBs, that determine who wins that game. Pittsburgh will have the home field advantage in this game. And I look for the Panthers to win the league. I don't think they're going to be in national contention because they have to play Miami, and they also have to play Utah in Utah out of league play. So to think that Pittsburgh's going to go undefeated right now, that is a stretch. And by the way, UConn, I know the Huskies are an up-and-coming team, but please let's not put them on a high plateau just yet. Remember, even though they're good, they did finish below 500 last season in the Big East. Time now to talk ACC football and the Atlantic Division. 2 teams you need to know about. Florida State. Granted, there's no more, dadgummit, Bobby Bowden, but you do return a lot of starters from that offense, including 5 of the offensive linemen and an All-American up front. Jimbo Fisher will have the luxury of seeing Christian Ponder back at QB. Was sensational last year, even though he did miss the last 3 games due to injury, so keeping him healthy will be a must. The defense last year stunk. It wasn't even in the top 100 in total defense. New defensive coordinator Mark Stoops, just the brother of Bob, hopes to change that. Florida State's schedule, it's not going to be very nice. Playing at Oklahoma, they close out the year against Florida. Plus they have a road game at Miami sandwiched in there. And they do get to host Clemson. We're going to talk about the Tigers right now. The Tigers probably going to have the best defensive line in the country and one of the better defenses around. Defensive line looks very loaded. I think a big reason why, though, the Tigers are excited about this season is the return of Kyle Parker at quarterback. Some thought he would go on and play professional baseball, decided to come back another year for the Tigers. I think that's big, and it better be because C.J. Spiller, their all-everything running back, he has now moved on. He's playing pro ball. But the defense for Clemson, I think, is going to be good enough to win quite a few games this year, including the showdown at Florida State in the Atlantic Division. Clemson, I think, will get back to the ACC championship game, and we'll see if they can do what they couldn't do last year, and that is win the ACC in general. Moving on to the Coastal Division, you're talking about the Miami Hurricanes and Ja'Cory Harris at quarterback. He returns. He's a guy that can hurt you with his feet. He's a guy that can hurt you with his arm. I'd like to see him be a little more consistent as well. Damian Barry is back at running back for the Canes. If he has a big year, that's really going to make life easier for Harris. It will take a little heat off him. The schedule might be the toughest in the country, though. Miami playing at Ohio State, at Pittsburgh, and they also have games at Georgia Tech, at Clemson, and they play Florida State at home. Yeah, Miami's schedule, it's a bear. North Carolina, the Tar Heels, I think have a lot of NFL-type prospects on the defensive side, so they'll be good there. But the offense last year was too inconsistent, couldn't finish off drives. North Carolina will be a spoiler, but not a contender. Georgia Tech is the defending league champions. Josh Nesbitt is back at QB, but the ground game did lose quite a bit, so there's a lot of retooling to do for that triple option for Paul Johnson's team. Georgia Tech is good, but I don't think they're going to be as good as last year. And remember, they are the defending league champions, though. The team that I think is going to win the ACC this year is Virginia Tech. They are good in every area, and in some areas, they are outstanding, including at quarterback. Tyrod Taylor is back. The backfield is the best in the country, unless you talk about Alabama. They have the edge, but nothing to sneeze about if you're the Hokies. And I think one big reason to be excited is the return of Darren Evans, who had that devastating injury last year, didn't play, but had a great 2008. He is back, and Ryan Williams is back as well. He had a terrific 2009. Va-Tech opens with Boise State on Labor Day. If they win that game, I think they go undefeated to at least November. Those last 3 games will tell you everything you need to know. Hosting Georgia Tech, going to North Carolina, and going to Miami, but they are better than those teams. They should be able to win. And by the way, that I mentioned Virginia Tech is good at special teams. That's nothing new. They've been good at special teams ever since Frank Beamer has been there, and they'll be good in that area again. It'll be Clemson. It'll be Virginia Tech for the ACC championship, Va-Tech to win it, and I think Va-Tech's going to run the table in the regular season and play Ohio State for the national championship. Finally, we're going to talk about some other college football teams. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish last year had no other choice but to get rid of Charlie Weis. It was that simple. They were a mediocre ball club. Enter former Cincinnati head coach Brian Kelly, and I think you're going to have a tougher Notre Dame team over time. Already Kelly barking at his team. He was not happy with the way spring practice went, so he is getting them into that don't be satisfied mode. Unfortunately for Notre Dame, new quarterback they're breaking in because Jimmy Clausen's onto the NFL. No Golden Tate at wideout. He was a speedy receiver, but they do return Michael Floyd at a wideout as well. He could be an All-American if all goes well. The defense, though, has a lot of work to do. They were not very good on the defensive side in 2009. The schedule for Notre Dame, not as tough as it's been in previous years. They still have to play USC, but remember USC might be a little down this year. You're also looking at playing Stanford, but you get them at home. You play at Michigan State. You play Pittsburgh, but get them at home. And you play at Boston College. Probably going to be an 8-4 season for Notre Dame. They'll be better, but they're not going to be in a BCS game. One team that could be in a BCS game, we're going to start with our BCS busters, is Boise State. The Broncos went undefeated in 2009, and the Broncos returned almost everybody, including the quarterback, Kellen Moore. He is back. That game on Labor Day night is going to tell you everything you need to know about Boise and a possible national championship appearance. If they win that game, and if they can beat Oregon State on the Blue Smurf field in late September, they're going to have a legitimate shot at the national championship, because nobody's going to beat them in the Western Athletic Conference. It's smooth sailing for the Broncos if they can get past Va-Tech and Oregon State. Of course, the national championship will greatly depend upon how the rest of the BCS teams do if they remain undefeated. If they can't, look for Boise to be in Glendale, Arizona for the national championship. I don't think, though, that they're going to beat Virginia Tech. That game's away from home. It's at the beginning of the season. It'll be a home-slanted crowd for the Hokies. TCU returns a lot of players as well. They're not going to be quite as good on defense as they were last year, but they'll still be good. Andy Dalton's back at QB. TCU will have a shot at running the table, I think, all the way up until the Utah game. That game at Utah, it's going to be difficult for TCU to win there, but I think they can go 11-1. Utah could be a BCS factor if they could beat Pittsburgh to open the season. That game is at home, and they have to play TCU at the end of the year, but they also have a tricky road game against Notre Dame. That could be the game where Utah stumbles and is not in the BCS mix. And then the Houston Cougars could, Case Keenum, lead the Cougars to a BCS bid. They're not going to be in the national championship hunt simply because their schedule outside of conference play isn't tough enough. They play at UCLA, at Texas Tech. It's not quite like Boise's non-conference slate, but they could go 13-0, and they very well could play in the BCS Bowl, but no national championship shot regardless. They have to revamp the offensive line a bit, but the passing game is still going to be lethal for Kevin Sumlin's Houston Cougars. Again, my national championship pick, Ohio State versus Va-Tech, and I have Ohio State winning the ball game and giving Jim Tressel his second national title. Again, we're going to be previewing the Big 12 later on in the month of August. So long for now. Thanks for joining me on the 2010 College Football Preview Show.